So we run our own company. We didn't have a backup financial plan. And so Mike and I both contracted our work hours significantly. And yet we sat down a year after Penelope was born and we realized both years we had made the same amount of money. So I thought, well then, what the heck was I doing my entire adult life? If I could have gotten the same results working half as much or less than half as much, I've just been overworking this whole time. Mm-hmm. And I realized I am not that special. If I'm overworking that much, other people are overworking that much.
Being a mom is the toughest job there is, and it doesn't come with instructions. So it's okay if you don't have all the answers. We'll figure it out together. This is Mom Brain with Hilaria Baldwin and Daphne Oz.
Hi, I'm Kate Northrup, and I am the author of Do Less, a revolutionary approach to time and energy management for busy moms. I am a mom of two. I have two little girls. They are 1 year old and 3.5. And I live in Maine with my husband. We run a company together. It's kind of a digital home base for primarily for female entrepreneurs and freelancers who want to learn how to have more by doing less and get better results with less effort and less stress. And yeah, that's me.
That was a good one.
You can find me on katenorthrup.com and on Instagram at Kate Northrup.
We're talking about miscarriages. We're starting off nice and happy.
But I think it's funny because I think it is a distinctly it's a female thing to. I don't know where we got cultured into thinking this, that we did something wrong, that there's something shameful, that we have to hide it, I remember feeling, because I had chemical pregnancies, but they would not shed, so I had to have DNCs to have them taken, basically removed.
There was no heartbeat?
There was never a heartbeat, but one of them, I was 12 weeks along or something, and it would not shed, and then you get into this whole other interesting world where at a certain point you're not actually allowed in New York State to, do what you need to do. So it's, it was.
Wait, what's the weeks in New York State? I thought it's until 20 something.
I haven't done a lot of research on it, so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in it. But I just know that when I finally got the appointment, I think I was at 13 weeks, and they were like, "You skirted it under the wire." I was like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
Because I'd never explored that, and then I realized that was still something people contend with, which is interesting. But I also think that more to the point was you go through this experience of you start to make plans in your head. Your life starts to get restructured. You're like, oh, okay, I can't travel in July because this is, and then that is all derailed. And you also are already attached to I was already attached to someone who doesn't exist, right, theoretically, you know? And anyway, you get this very emotional connection to your own body and to the expectation of this new member of your
idea of somebody.
Yeah. And then you're forced to deal with both the grief that no one outside of you really understands, plus the shame and some subliminal messaging that somehow it was your fault. And then nobody talks about it, so you think it's just you.
Right.
And so I think that was something that was really powerful about you coming forward, Hilaria, was that people could have this conversation of first of all, you're super fertile, you have this beautiful family, and it still affects you when something like this happens.
100%. I mean, also, because this also was a completely different experience for me before than I've had before. I remember going in and seeing the fetal pull, and you're looking to see if there's a heartbeat, and then all of a sudden you see this little blinking, and then
you
have
breathe.
That relief.
You're like,
Yes, because the waiting, anybody who's had a baby or tries to have a baby or anything knows that any kind of waiting, even if you have a perfectly healthy baby, any kind of waiting feels like an eternity between appointments, everything. And then I go in the next time to hear the heartbeat because it was too early to hear the heartbeat. And I hear chukung, chukung, chukung. And I think everything is fine because I'm like, great. Now you couldn't hear the heartbeat. Now you can hear the heartbeat. And they said, it's not a fast heartbeat.
Yeah.
And they're like, I want it to be around 90, and it was, in the 70s. And I'm like, okay, well, come on, what are you grading my kid? 70 is not bad. And then I learned that anything below 90 is not viable. That being said, because I was breastfeeding and I haven't, had my period in a really long time, we didn't know how pregnant I was. Right. So you're like, oh, maybe I'm just even earlier than it was. We saw growth from the week before. I went in the week after, and the heartbeat was exactly the same. And then, they had said, what, you really should have come in 10 days afterwards. And I'm like, okay, well, sorry. I couldn't wait that long. I'm waking up in the middle of the night. But I went home, and of course I was sad. I cried. I really wanted to hold my babies. And then I did a little bit of research, not Dr. Google, but like actually like, reading medical journals research. And they said basically anything after 6-point-something weeks, I think it was like 6.2, lower than 90 is not, there's 0% chance of viability. So even though they wanted me to come in again to look at it again, I emotionally started to be able to process that this wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And my and that felt okay. And then when I went in the week afterwards, that was the other day, I went in the week afterwards, Tuesday, to see it, I knew immediately that there was not going to be a heartbeat. And I told the woman there before. She's like, well, let's see. And I'm like, no. We are not going to like raise expectations. There is going to be no heartbeat. And we looked, and it was interesting because I'd never seen that before. It was just gray. And you could see that the pregnancy, what supports the pregnancy had expanded, starting to make the placenta and all that kind of stuff. But the baby was exactly the same, and there was no flicker. There was no nothing. It was just lifeless. And of course I cried again, but it was, it was a mixture of relief, and this is the end of the story, and I'm okay because I know that I'm not alone. I had already shared it because I decided to share that I was in that process, because the process is sometimes the hardest. The outcome is sad, but then you can start to deal with it. The process with the uncertainty is really hard.
Is so hard.
It's so hard. I remember when I was, and it'd be interesting to hear what you guys say about this. So I remember when I was pregnant with my first one, and I get that round ligament pain of like the cramping, and then you think that you're like gonna have your period. You run to the bathroom, and you like no blood. You're like, okay, I'm still pregnant. But I would get like really bad implantation cramps, and I just was like, sure, that's it. This is not gonna happen. And I had already had 2 of my chemical pregnancies were before her. So then you wonder, can I carry a baby? And I said to my mother, I was like, this is just like not fair. This is not fair. And she said, get ready for a lifetime of feeling like this is not fair. This is your body and nature like starting to prepare you for that. You can't control the outcome with your kids. You cannot control this. So you have to be okay with uncertainty. And because I'm a mother of 4, even though they're not, they're all very, very young, I feel like I have enough experience now to have that perspective of saying, you know what, I have to be okay with things that are out of my control. And I feel like that helped me process this situation.
That's beautiful. I mean, I really do feel like the process of whether it's for each person getting pregnant or being pregnant or waiting for adoption, I mean, that whole process or a surrogate, like it really does, at least for me, it broke me down and all my control freakishness because it was just like the changes in my body. And I was so tired, and I had never had anything before that I couldn't just like work harder to fix or just learn a new skill or like see somebody about.
Totally.
It was wild, that aspect of surrender.
And when you like go to the best and you're like, give me an answer. Give me an answer. And they're like,
nothing.
I remember my doctor said to me one time, actually my 4th pregnancy, at the end, I had too much water. With Leo, I didn't have enough water at the very end, like very, very end. And I think that was because my due date was off a little bit. And with Romeo, I had too much water, and like legitimately too much water. He was producing extra amniotic fluid, which just meant that he was peeing extra.
Amazing.
Continues to do that as he is out of the womb. And he was very big, and I am not a small person. I mean, I'm not a big person. And so it was just like a giant belly. And then they worry about like cord prolapse. If your water breaks, that the cord could come out first before the head. I kept on going into labor, and then he would float out of position. So I'd be in labor for like 4 hours, and then like slowly my contractions would get further apart. And he would, like, I was like, no! 4 hours of my life wasted. But he said to me, I love my doctor. Dr. Robert Sassoon, if you ever listen to Mom Brain, you are my hero, and I know that you know that. But he texted me. We're on a texting basis. I wrote to him. I was like, please help me. I can't do this anymore. 4th child around. Can't do this anymore. And he says to me, he's like, nature is a beautiful thing. And my first thing was like, never say that to a woman who is about to have a baby.
Must be very comfortable over there.
I'm sure.
In your male body.
Exactly.
Your male body 80 blocks away where I can't reach you and call
Who
your
has never experienced what I'm going through right now.
Exactly. That being said, he was 100% right. As I watch him, and he's always right. He knows what he's doing. He has a little bit of experience with this, And as my pregnancy went forward, and as I had the baby, he did it in exactly the right way. And you could tell that he just knows. He knows. And this time around as well, when I told him, I said, it's not viable. He said, we need to trust nature and we need to see this out. And I said, okay, nature
I do
again.
love that, though. I mean, to have a doctor who is reverent of nature and the fact that our bodies are made from nature, like that's beautiful.
But that's what they're seeing. I mean, they're seeing firsthand that as much science as you can have and as much of understanding of the workings of the body that he can have, there is some part of this process that is miraculous. And
I think the whole thing is miraculous.
The whole thing is, but when I say miraculous, I mean that we don't know why, and we kind of just have to trust the process. And he's been so great at teaching me to trust the process. And we are the yin and the yang. I mean, he is like so Western in so many ways, and I'm a yoga instructor. And I think that that's one of the reasons that I connected with him so much, is because I need reminders of certain things, and then so we meet each other halfway, and I think that's why I've been very, very, very lucky to have him. So
I love that.
He doesn't sound so Western in the regard of I think a lot of our impulse is to intervene. It's to strip the membrane, get get it going, and I think we've talked on the podcast before about, because we've all had such different birth experiences, and Hilaria and I have shared a lot about ours, and I know from having had a no drug birth with John versus births with Philo and with Nico, where some I had to have my membrane stripped, some I had to have Pitocins, whatever, that the ones where we tried to speed things along for whatever reason. I had dropping amniotic fluid too. They thought it was at a dangerous level, so I had to speed things along. But but that was Philo. Philo wasn't ready to come out yet, so my labor dragged forever, and it was also my first. So your body's that's what's when you say miracle, it is impossible for us to comprehend the millions and millions of steps that need to go perfectly for a baby to form, grow inside you, birth without killing you. The whole thing is just absolutely amazing.
It's amazing.
But it was really an incredibly interesting experience to be able to juxtapose that birth, where everything did feel kind of trampled on a little bit. Everything was we're gonna intervene here because we have to. We're gonna speed your process along, but your body's not quite ready, so it's a much more traumatic experience that needs to be. Versus with John, where look, I'm not a fan of being in pain if you don't need to be. But the crazy thing is, with his birth, I was in the least amount of pain I've been in any of my three, and that's really interesting to me, given that he was the only one I didn't have an epidural with. The whole thing is just, the body does know what it's doing.
No two pregnancies are the same.
And I also think this whole, and then we're going to actually talk about Kate, because
I know, sorry.
Hilaria and I hear every freaking week.
Great.
You guys are hearing a lot about us, but you're gonna actually let you hear from our
we
guest.
We invited you to talk about us.
I would love to talk about you.
We're so glad you're here to hear about us. Great. But I don't even remember what the hell I was talking about now.
Pain, epidural.
No, that people talking about childbirth is the worst pain you've ever been through in your life. Every woman's experience is different, but I do think that we have dramatized a little bit the screaming woman.
Oh, totally.
In this agonizing, writhing pain, the whole thing. I went on this maybe strangely, masochistic voyeurism thing before I had John, where I watched hours of home birthing videos.
Bad idea. Bad
No,
idea.
I cry every time. I'm such a I cry when I see it.
But the home birthing videos was actually, there was nothing to cry about other than just the idea that
No, I mean, I cry because I think it's really beautiful.
It's beautiful. But these women were, first of all, they're totally in. It's weird because you're completely out of control. To your point, you cannot predict any of it. You are, and this is so much a metaphor for the life that you have raising children, where they are their own people. They have their own destiny. You are just sort of along for the ride in it. And I as the child of a doctor, hugely medical family, I have utmost respect for the medical system, and I've chosen to have my babies in a hospital because I want that backup,
Just in case.
But just in case, because God forbid, you never know. And the difference between, a 5-minute drive to the hospital or a 2-minute ride in an elevator can be the difference between life and death. And but in any case, the point is, I watch all these home birth videos, and it really put me in a different mindset, because you don't think about childbirth until I didn't think about childbirth until I was like very close to the end with the first one, and I realized at that moment that all I'd been exposed to was agony, and that what these videos showed me was actually that it could be, if not bliss, peaceful.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's such so I was raised by an OBGYN.
Yes.
So I thought about birth way more than your average person before having my own kids. And I was raised by somebody who's like a really big believer in home birth, actually.
Oh, wow.
Even though she's only delivered babies in a hospital, and I was born in a hospital, and I had both of my girls in a hospital. But I think that, to your point of like, it's so important to be conscious about what we're ingesting in terms of information, because like Hollywood really does dramatize birth, and there's no scene in a hospital, like in a TV or whatever, that it's just like anything. I've only had 2, and they were very, very different. I had a C-section and then a VBAC with no drugs. Wow. So same thing. Like my first one was quite painful and dramatic, and then my second was uncomfortable, but it was really
manageable,
calm, which is so interesting. Like,
lot of times
not that one is bad or good. Like they were what they were.
We're prepared. We have to. I mean, I chose epidural with all 4 of them, and when I have my 5th, by the way, because I am get back on the horse kind of person. Not going to end on this note. When there's like, okay, that's
as it were.
Okay. But
get back on the horse, she says.
On the horse. Okay, you guys all know what I mean out there. Please. But I would choose an epidural again, just because I had such a great experience with it. It was like they gave me just enough, not too much. I know that I'm a yoga teacher. I'm not supposed to do an epidural, but I do unexpected things.
Then
I
do whatever you want.
No, people think that I eat kale and sticks all the time and like deal with incredible amounts of pain. So anyway, I had a point, and I think I still have pregnancy brain.
You with your 5th, you'll still have an epidural, but it will be a different. It will be a different birth than the other ones.
It will be nope, gone.
Pain is
gone.
calm.
Pain is gone. Oh, with that. So, but we are thank you.
Mom brain.
But you know what? When 2 of us have mom brain at the same time, then we're really sunk. But if we can remind each other what's going on, no. But I think that we have to realize that we are prepared and capable of doing this. Like thousands and thousands of people, I know I should say thousands of years maybe, did it without painkillers, and we can too. The thing if we want to, we don't have to, and that was my thing of looking at it. It was like I know I could, but I don't have to, and I felt very comfortable with the kind of care that I was getting. That it was going to be administered correctly and done, in a very mild way, the way that I wanted it to be. I mean, I think with all these things, no 2 births are the same within the same person. By the way, do I seem like my throat's a little? Apparently, I'm getting a little too husky over here. Cal just gave me some water. I think, you know what it is? It's that because I was pregnant, I wasn't able to take anything, and so I've had like a lingering for a long time. So good news is I can now take off medicine.
Well, that is the good news. But that's why I drink this like hot, vitamin C liquid the whole time we're in here.
Keeps you
also
keeps you
so
flowing.
I can sound like a man.
So there's two things. Right. We just have a sexier voice.
Really
sexy mom brain.
Sexy mom brain. Welcome back to another episode of Sexy Mom Brain.
Sexy mom brain. I am really into that 90s deep voice. I just think there's so
beautiful.
much gravitas in that.
Did you ever used to leave your message when you had a cold?
Oh.
Like you're like
Hilaria waits to call everyone back till she has a cold.
But that can make you sound like Kermit.
No, like
oh, you're like voicemail. Hey,
you've reached Hilaria. Leave a message.
Wait, oh my gosh, we should totally have mom mail be a voicemail box. Yes. Where we're like, hey, you reached, or we could do it, with like a slight gut. What's it called when it's a vocal fry where it's like, hi, you've reached Hilaria and Daphne. This is a ridiculous episode of Mom Brain.
I think Cal's going to be cutting all this.
Cal is writing skip to the end.
He's like, okay, from
abort
11
mission.
minutes to 17 minutes, cut out. Oh, he's writing us notes.
Back on track.
Well, okay, so
Great,
watch
thanks,
this. Watch the track. Watch the track, Kat. Okay, so one thing, Kate, that you brought up before we move on to do less is that this is not just if you physically have the baby. This has to do with dads. This has to do with adoption, which is, I mean, we need to have somebody come on here and talk about adoption, because so many of my friends have chosen to adopt, and it is a long, excruciating, heart-wrenching process. And again, the process that prepares us for a lifetime of that as we sign up to be parents. Surrogates as well. I mean, how many of my friends they couldn't carry, or, you know, whether that be that they, you know, had certain fertility something, or a gay couple, then, or whatever the reason that they had for doing it, and how many losses that they had.
Oh, heart-wrenching stories. Heart-wrenching. And there's just a whole thing of like feeling out of your control. So Kate, I love that you brought that up, because we always want to make sure that on Mom Brain, every parent is feeling, you know, heard here, whether that be whichever way that you decided to have children. So thank you very much for bringing that up. And then I want to talk about do less. So do less, I love that, because I feel like the more that we do, we don't always do it better. So talk to us a little bit about do less. Yeah, so do less is really like, this whole thing started when I was so exhausted during my first pregnancy, and like I couldn't make myself work. It was so bizarre. I mean, my brain was not on board, and I cut my work hours by about in half because I just literally, my body wouldn't do it. And my husband and I run our own company.
Did you have a meltdown before? Like what were you just like?
It just like happened.
But were you just like, wow, you know what? Because I know that I'm sometimes the kind of person where I'm getting better, but definitely, you know, younger Hilaria, I would have to have like an extreme meltdown before I had the confidence to be like, I need to do less. So, or are you just very wise and you were like, I need to do less because I'm not feeling quite myself?
It's really hard to describe. It was not a conscious decision. I just like, my body stopped working. I mean, my body was functioning from a health perspective.
But you had to make the decision to make the change.
Well, sort of and sort of not.
Well, give everyone your background a little bit, because you and your husband do run your own business. You moved your family from Manhattan up to, like, tell everybody about that journey.
Okay, I mean, how far do you want me to go back?
The Cliff Notes.
Yeah, the Cliff Notes version is,
yes.
I left New York City in 2011 to go on a grand adventure. I found my husband within 5 days, though that was not my plan. We went on a cross-country road trip, which was supposed to be 5 days. It turned into 10 months. And then I moved him back to Maine with me, because I always wanted to raise my kids in Maine because it was a great place to grow up. And, you know, God love you too. I do not know how you raise kids in the city. So rock on.
You know what? There are easier parts and hard parts of each place.
I would imagine.
City is great because there's always an activity.
Right.
You can't just like open your back door and like they can run out, because that's dangerous. And you usually don't have a back door. So front door leads to the street.
Yeah,
so
don't
very
do that.
dangerous. No, don't do that. But like, you know, my kids can be, you know, having some meltdown and I can walk not very
easily
far.
To just
and
move
there's
on.
some like super fun activity for them to do.
That is a good point. So I always wanted to raise kids in Maine. I moved back to my hometown. My husband, Mike, I scooped him up along the way. So we run our own company. We didn't have a backup financial plan. So it wasn't like, oh, if I stop working, I have, you know, his income or some sort of maternity leave or paternity leave. We know we don't have like paid family leave in this country. So there was no backup plan. So we needed to get the same results from working far less. And that first year of parenthood really kicked our butts. I mean, Penelope was a sick baby. I had postpartum insomnia. I had postpartum anxiety, a traumatic birth experience. She was waking up like every 10 minutes. I mean, it was so bad. And we only had 10 hours of childcare that first year, a week. Not for the whole year, but a week.
I was gonna say, you spaced that out how? Minute by minute?
Yeah, it was 15 minutes a week. So I could take a shower.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say,
Yeah.
see, that's where you go shower.
It's always,
always.
You
Just,
know
I
when
just
it's a
want
shower,
to wash my
or
hair.
I remember the first time Mike took Penelope out after we'd had her. And he was like, you can do whatever you want. And I went and got my eyebrows waxed. Like, that was the thing that I was like, I will feel human again if I have a well-shaped brow.
Wait, but sorry
Fair.
to focus on the vanity element of that for 1 second, but I think it's important. There's a weird thing that always happens where right after you give birth, you have this surge of hormones, right? And everything plumps up and you have no wrinkles and you're like, everything's kind of hazy and dewy and you're so tired anyway. And you're like, I don't look terrible. Like, this is okay. You know, your eyes are kind of squinted shut anyway. And then at some point, 7 days, like almost to an exact day, 7 days post-birth, everything goes away. And all of a sudden, just like all the black under eye bags show up and the exhaustion is so visible and the pain and like everything has finished being numb and just the pain is there now. And I remember thinking the same thing. I remember looking in the mirror and being like, damn, I wish I'd gotten eyelash extensions. like
It's
something.
those little things, they make such a big difference.
Yeah.
Like I got a pedicure, soon before both girls were born, even though anyway. So I got my eyebrows waxed. I don't even know what we're talking about.
Your hair.
I
get
become like BFFs with my hair people. And
Just
then
go in and get a blowout?
They'll come
come to
and
you.
they'll come and visit me.
That's great.
And this is not
We
I'm
don't really
paying
have
somebody,
that in Maine.
guys don't no. It's a friend who can blow out hair.
Okay.
And they come to meet the baby and simultaneously blow out my
See?
hair.
Let's add that to the meal train. Like you can bring a casserole or you could bring a blowout.
You could blow. Yes.
I love
No,
that.
it was life changing.
I'm gonna offer that to my friends.
To feel
That's
like
really nice.
it's like the nicest thing.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Okay, wait. So you had 10 hours
anyway,
of childcare.
So we had no childcare, and so Mike and I both contracted our work hours significantly. And yet we sat down a year after Penelope was born, and this is after 9 months, and then plus a year, whatever amount of time that is. And we realized both years we had made the same amount of money. So I thought, well then, what the heck was I doing my entire adult life? If I could have gotten the same results working half as much or less than half as much, I've just been overworking this whole time. And I realized I am not that special. If I'm overworking that much, other people are overworking that much. And especially as I started to navigate motherhood and just my massively limited bandwidth for both actually doing my business and also caring about my business, because once I had this baby, I was like, what's my business? Blah, blah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm trying to
Puts
keep this
everything to
person alive.
perspective, yeah.
It really put everything into perspective. And so, but I'm achievement oriented. I want results. And so it was really learning. So I kind of went back in time and I thought, well, what did I do differently? And could I codify that? Could I, and I could. And then I started
replicate it.
practicing it with a bunch of women. I have about 1,000 women in a community, and they were researching it with me. And so we tried it out. And because we were looking at how can we change our expectations? How can we let ourselves off the hook, but not sacrifice our well-being, our results, and really do less literally in order to have and achieve more?
Right.
And so that's where it came from.
I mean, what I love about you, and I want to continue to delve into this a little bit more, is that you're taking your life lessons and you're being a teacher and you're wanting to help other people.
That's what I do.
Yes. And I think that is just so kind. That's so nice. Because you could sit with yourself and be like, okay, I'm going to do this all by myself. But you're like, you know what? I know you see the similarities. And that's what's incredible. And for me as a yoga teacher, I get to see so many people. I would used to teach 300 people a day. And everybody's talking about how diverse and different and everything. It's yeah, sure. We have some things that are different, but we're actually a lot more similar than we are different. And that's kind of what here on Mom Brain is all about. Is let's come and talk to people from all different walks of life, and let's talk about things that we all care about.
Yeah, because when we tell the truth about our experience, it turns out we're not that different. I think it's when we're lying about things or pretending that they're different that then we think oh, well, she's got it better, or this person, or whatever. But when we tell the truth, like when, for you talking about your experience with your recent miscarriage, like that's just such a unifier. And I think that we need to do more of that. And that's why I love what you two are doing here on Mom Brain.
We are wanting to make the world a better place, and better place by, like, let's stop pretending that we're just like, you have all the answers. You're like, actually, it's because I'm working less.
Yeah. Well, I know that's the thing, right? Don't we always look at women and we say, like, working moms who seem to be doing a lot of things. We look at them and we say, well, how do you do it all?
Yeah.
And I don't know how you do it all. People always say that. I don't know how you do it all. Like you're like a magical human. You're like, no, just learn some shortcuts.
Well, the answer is, anytime anybody says that to me, I'm like, I don't.
Yeah, of course I don't.
I don't do it all.
I also think there are two sort of psychological things at play. The first is that I think in your own life, most people frequently focus on the negative, where when they're looking at other people's lives, they focus on the positive.
That's a good point.
And that's partly because of social media. And frankly, people only advertise their positive for the most part, which is why I also think there's a really important note without being in any way self-indulgent or like poor me about it, that we sometimes highlight that there are challenges for everyone, that everyone does struggle with certain things, and nothing is this sort of perfect utopia that it seems. And on this, at the same time, we should always be looking for ways to highlight in our own lives the positive. And that I gave a talk last night, and a woman had asked about that, like how do you remind yourself of those positive moments when you are in a low point? And that's a lot of why when I had Philo, I like vowed that I was going to journal, because I really wanted to remember all these special things that were going to be happening along that first journey that I was taking. And I completely did not journal because I got so it's overwhelming. And I'm the type of person where like I wanted to be a doctor, but I wanted to be a surgeon. So like if I couldn't be a surgeon, I didn't want to go to medical school at all, And if I'm not going to write,
it's called a perfectionist, by the way. It's called a perfectionist.
That's the thing.
It's really weird. But it was like if I wasn't going to write 3 pages of handwritten, beautiful cursive diarying, then I wasn't worth doing it. And what I finally figured out to do, maybe when she was 2, probably it took me that long, was just a sentence a day. And now obviously I have other kids that are included in this.
Do you actually do that?
I do. And sometimes it ends up having, like if I'm traveling, I don't have like a little notebook. I have a notebook that I keep next to my bed, but when I'm traveling, I just do it on my phone and I'll write it when I get home. But I also have started doing little, like if I did something really that I was proud of in a day, or that I wanted to remind myself why I was successful at something in a day, I'll write that down too, because I think there's something like, I don't know if it's psychosomatic, it's something about using your own hand to write an idea down that actually imprints it on your body and in your brain and solidifies it. So I do think that's really critical. And then there was a second point about allowing your life to embrace, doing, when you say, how do you do it all? Or I don't know how you do it all. Allowing your life to embrace whatever you've chosen to do in that moment. And yeah, people say live in the moment, which I think is great, but it's hard to be actionable around that. I think what I've tried to grapple with and come to terms with is, if I've chosen to be somewhere and I'm in a position to do this, if I've chosen to be somewhere, some part of it makes me happy. And I have to let myself enjoy being happy in that moment. And maybe because I used to think, if I'm at work, I'm missing this time with my kids, I'll never get it back. If I'm home with my kids, I'm missing work opportunities, I'll never get those back. And it was just joy stealing left, right, and center for me.
And then you're never anywhere.
You're never anywhere. You're never happy with what you're doing. You're not living your life
you're
well.
You're resentful
and resistant.
It's a horrible feeling.
Yeah. So letting yourself, being okay with your own decisions, knowing you don't need to justify them to anyone else, and letting yourself be happy in that moment so that you can be happy in all the other moments, I think is really critical. So it's not that anyone does it all, but maybe some people enjoyed what it is that they're doing a little bit more,
That or they create peace with it, even, where when I've had jobs that I really didn't enjoy, you have to find that's your life experience. Those are your minutes, your seconds that are passing by.
Yeah.
And you better make them count. You better, if it's a bad experience, I try to learn something good.
Yes.
Now, I love what you're talking about as well, the coping, and I want to also get your opinion about that, of coping when things are difficult, and then proactively trying to make change from that. So like I have something that, sometimes my husband finds it to be extraordinarily annoying. He's like, you're a little Miss Positive. But it helps me. It's like if I drop a coffee on myself, I'll be like, at least they're black pants and they're not white pants. I literally will go to like the most ridiculous, childish thing of like, oh, this could be way worse. I mean, when even something like with the miscarriage where I allowed myself to, I don't want anyone to think that I wasn't sad, because of course I was sad, and of course I cried, and of course it's not what I wanted, and I definitely didn't want to experience it. But I try to think about all of the things. I feel so fortunate that I have 4 kids. I feel so fortunate that it happened relatively early, because had it happened, people were so open in telling me stories where they lost babies at 20 weeks. Yeah. They had stillborn children. Yeah. That's something that I have a tremendous amount of respect, and I look at those women and I say, I don't know how strong you are, like how you have that strength. And we all look at each other and we think like, how do you do that? I don't know how you do it. Exactly going back to what it is. So I'll look at the different things. And then I also look at, and this goes back to what you were saying, I'll look and say, I'm suffering right now, but I'm going to suffer in a way that is proactive. And not only I can make my life better, but I can speak about it. I can teach about it. I am a teacher. Ultimately, when people come up to me and they don't know me and they ask me what I do, I say I'm a teacher, because I am a yoga teacher. And that is my job in life. And my job is to figure it out and then teach people.
Report back.
Report back. I love that. So going back to your story, I feel like our little tangents on Mom Brain.
Yeah, it's great.
Going back to your story, where was it where you had this idea of like, okay, now I want to go and teach?
Well, the truth is, this may sound like a little woo. I don't know how woo you guys are.
I am very woo. I feel like we both are kind of. Like,
we appreciate a woo.
Okay, great. So I got my period back after my daughter was 13 months, my first, and literally all at once, like the whole thing came to me. I started so. I don't know if you guys have talked about periods much, but on Mom Brain.
I don't think so, actually.
But they're responsible for being moms, so here we are.
Yeah, no, yes. It's definitely, we've talked about,
everything
things
else
that are on the same
It's in the genre.
line. Yes.
So basically, when I first got my period for the first time, it was like awful. I hated it. It was just like the saddest day of my life. And it took me until I was 33 to be like,
you mean when you got your period the first day?
First time.
Okay. When I was like after you had a kid.
No. When I was, I don't remember how old I was, something like that. Yeah. Okay. And then it was so cool to have this moment where it came back, and for the first time in my life, I was actually excited because it was like this return to me. Yeah. I was like, oh.
Were you still nursing? Did you nurse?
I was still nursing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Both times I got it back, I was still nursing. I don't know what the biology of that is.
And it's interesting. We can have a whole conversation about that, because so did you, I lost my train of thought. Go back. Sorry. Just kidding. Never mind.
If it comes back, stop me.
Yep.
So anyway, now I'm totally
off
track.
Sorry.
No. So then and I had been really in this, I'll explain the framework in a minute, because it has to do with your coping question, and like how do we mine the gold out of the shitty sludge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I had really been in this place of like really not knowing what my work was, because I had a book in 2013 called Money, a Love Story that came out, did very well. And after that, I just didn't really feel like talking about money anymore. And I was like, shit, once you write a book about something, they want you to be the expert on that topic. And like, I had nothing further to say, which was a bummer. And so
or a great thing, because your book was so good that it said everything you needed to say on the subject.
Yeah, mic drop, done.
Closure.
You're a Renaissance woman, and
I am a Renaissance
can now
woman.
Be something new.
I love
like
that. A serial topic creative type person.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it was like 3 years of getting married, having a kid. I was doing things, but like from a career perspective, I was very unclear on what I was meant to be doing. And then all of a sudden, like it was literally like the day my period came back, all of a sudden it came clear. And there was a very funny story that I don't know that I've mentioned it before. I was at my girlfriend's baby shower. I flew to San Francisco to surprise her right around this time. And I called my husband and I was like, hun, I got it. Like, I got the whole thing. I got what my next book is. Like, I got the whole new body of work. Like, it's here. And I said, it's called Do Less. Like, I just knew the title, the whole thing. And he was like, you're never going to believe. He was like, holy shit, you're never going to believe this. And I was like, what? And he goes, well, I'll tell you when you get home. Okay, fine. So I go
That's a
home.
Oh my no, that's so. Oh, that would kill me.
He really likes surprises. He likes to create a whole thing.
But do you
about
like
stuff.
surprises?
I do.
Oh, okay,
it works.
as long as you're on the same
I like
page.
to be surprised.
Because
I'm not good
literally
at
would
creating
go,
them.
I would like strangle my husband through the phone.
No. He's like a great orchestrator. Like he threw like a 5-day birthday bash for my 30th birthday. Like surprise after
that's
surprise
so
after surprise.
cool.
Beautiful. So anyway, I get home. And he has these vanity plates out on the kitchen counter. And this was 24 hours later. So, like, he had
He couldn't
ordered
have
them a
made
long
them,
time.
yeah.
And the vanity plates for our new car were due less.
I'm sorry. Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding you.
And wait, was this like a phrase that you guys used
No.
at home?
Never.
You guys
we
are just-
had not, like, it was not
And
part
going
of our
back to how you
vocabulary.
guys met, you guys
Weird.
met immediately. You guys met and then immediately was like this.
We met, and then 6 months later, I invited him to drive across the country with me,
But that's still pretty
which
fast.
is a very odd thing that I did. I don't know what I was like. We were not dating. It was not even romantic. And I
But he
didn't
said
even invite
yes.
him thinking it would be romantic. Because had I thought it would be romantic, I never would have invited him. Because who does that?
Okay, but is this one of those things in hindsight? Because sometimes I'm like I would go out to dinner with a guy and I was so naive and I was like, oh, we're friends, right? And they were like, what did you think?
Yeah, no, he
What
was-
did you think? Like he definitely
Oh,
thought something
he
different.
knew.
So in
Yeah.
hindsight, you get that you kind of asked him out on a date to drive
In
cross country.
hindsight.
Yes, okay.
But I would never have done that if I knew that's what I was doing. I've never asked a guy out in my life. So, anyway.
Which just goes to show breaking habits sometimes leads to very positive
Yeah,
results.
totally. And being unattached because I was not having any outcome in mind.
No
I just was
expectation.
like, this would be fun. And he seems quite capable if I like got stuck in a snowbank in,
Change a tire.
in like Indiana.
Strong, burly man.
knows how to use the Waze app.
basically, yeah. I was like, he's got really good arms. I think he
Can lift the car.
Oh my God. And he was running his own business, so he was available anyway to work on the road. So that's where the book came from. And it just like literally came through. And so this really interesting data from Dr. Luann Brisendine's book, The Female Brain, she talked about a study in her chapter, The Mom Brain, which I think you two would both love. And this study studied mama monkeys. So they had 3 groups of mama monkeys. One group got consistent resources every day.
Wait, we're actually talking about actual monkeys.
Yep. No,
Okay.
this is real.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes we have like names for ourselves.
This
so
is
who knows?
not a
Okay.
metaphor.
No,
These were
these
monkeys.
are actual monkeys. Okay.
They got the same amount of abundant food and water every day for themselves and their babies. Another group got a limited amount of food and water every day for their babies. But the same amount every day was just low. And a third group got inconsistent. Some days it was a lot, some days it was not. Interestingly, they found that the monkeys who got a lot of food and a little food both did great. They were great moms. They were very sane. They were calm. The third group went psychotic, and they could not care for their babies appropriately. And they lost their minds.
The stress.
The stress of the inconsistency, because the mom brain wants something
Stability.
to count on. And so for me, I'm bringing it
It
around.
just gives me chills.
that
I don't want you
amazing?
to. I'll tell you why.
I'll
I
know
don't want
where
you to
I'm
lose
going.
your train of thought. Well, it gives me chills. Just to think about that study is so valuable to us as humans to learn about. But like, I hate thinking about the mother monkeys
it's
and their
awful.
babies. That makes me want to cry. But I also think that that is such a perfect example of how we as women in whatever counterpart society you believe in, where like people pair up or match up together because we need community, our only drive is to create stability. Our only drive is to create uniformity of like predictable outcome for our
Predictability.
families. And now I'm going to sit here quietly so I don't cry on the microphone.
I cry all the time on my podcast, so I mean, by all means.
I'm really hormonal. Blame my hormones.
Well, interestingly enough, that's the perfect segue. So at that time, I had started tracking my period for the first time like in my life. Before that, I was like the 13-year-old girl who would be out like,
Surprise.
You know, I was like 29, but I would be like, oh shit, I got to go to a drugstore.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, when I became a mother and it came back, I was obsessed with tracking it. And not only tracking when my period would come, but tracking all 4 phases. Because unfortunately, we are given...
What is that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we are given a massive disservice in like sex ed or health class. We're just taught like that the period comes. There are these 4 unique phases of our cycle that we go through every month that each have like tremendous gifts for us.
During the entire cycle or just during the time that you bleed?
No, during the whole month.
Okay, bring us through because I don't know.
Yeah,
exactly.
So this is what I learned. I had sort of known it because my mom, had talked about it, but it's not like I read a lot of her books. I mean, I'm just being honest. So I don't know. Do you read your dad's books?
Not at all.
Like we get a lot of information by
I own them
osmosis.
all. Yeah.
As do I.
Yes.
So your period comes. That's the menstrual phase. We're familiar with that. Then and your brain is wired differently at each one of these phases. And energetically, they're the same as the 4 seasons of the year. So it's really easy to remember. And energetically, they're the same as the 4 phases of the moon.
Is the menstrual, is that fall?
No, the menstrual. You were close. You were close.
It's winter.
Things
It's
are
barren.
falling out.
So I'm going to tell you. So the winter of your cycle is the menstrual time. It's the time for rest. It's going to be obviously your lowest energy time, but it's also the time when your brain is the most connected between your left and right hemispheres, and you'll get your best ideas and your strongest intuition at that time. Which is why when my period came back with my daughter, all of a sudden, just like my whole next work dropped with it. So if you're thinking about something and you don't know what to do about it, in terms of making a decision, I'll remind my girlfriends. They'll call me up like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, where are you in your cycle? Just wait until you have your period. You'll get the answer in 5 minutes. Or if you're not cycling, I actually find that it's the same thing on the new moon for me. So there's the woo for you. But
We love it.
Wait, I'm riveted. Like this is
I know. I'm going to be
fascinating
using
to me.
this now.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, that's the menstrual phase. Then there's the follicular phase. And the follicular phase is like the springtime. So it's a time of new beginnings. It's actually when your brain is the best for planning and brainstorming and initiating. You get an energy surge. It's also, interestingly enough, a similar energy of the second trimester of pregnancy. So that's, when you get that burst of energy in that second trimester. And then your next phase is ovulation. We're familiar with that if you're trying to get pregnant, obviously, or if you're trying not to get pregnant. And that's the same energy as the full moon or the summertime. It's like that full bloom time. It's the time when your pheromones are the strongest. So waitresses report getting the highest tips during ovulation. You'll also just even if you don't feel like you look your best, you'll get the most attention. It's actually when you're the most attractive, literally and also metaphorically, for what you want, And then the next phase is called the luteal phase. It's the autumn of your cycle, and it's the same energy as the waning moon. So as the moon is waning towards new, and that's the time of your brain is the most wired for detail work. So crossing your T's, dotting your I's. It's a really focused time, but it's also an inward time. And also, this is really, really important. So we have a whole, we have PMS, right, is this medical diagnosis that we have, which is real. But also, what happens during that time is we are poised to look for the negative. So we were talking about negative and positive before. During that 10 days or so before your period, especially the few days before, you're heightened for seeing everything that's wrong. And here's what's so important for women to know. Everything that's wrong during that time that you feel like is wrong, you can trust that information. You just can't trust the volume of it. So it may feel like everything's terrible, but it's the time during the month when your body gives you the information about what you need to look at and what you need to work on during your next cycle. But it doesn't mean you have to leave your marriage and leave your job. Even though in that moment it feels like I just remember
Cancel everything.
It's like, oh my God, everything is falling apart. I'm out, right? So you can trust your feelings at that time. You just can't trust the volume of them. And so what's really interesting, and I do have to give a shout out to Lisa VT, who wrote a great book called Woman Code, is you can start to schedule your time around those phases of your cycle so that you're doing the thing that your brain is most wired for, and everything gets covered in a month. Wow. And you do the thing that you're best suited for at that time, rather than what we do in our culture, which is complain about the fact that we're low energy or say there's something wrong with us because we don't feel like hanging out with people. And I have in my book, I have a daily energy tracker where I lead you through actually seeing what your energy is like over a 28-day period-ish. And you can do this even when you're pregnant, because I created all this stuff while I was pregnant and nursing and not having a period.
Do men experience this as well?
So men actually, their hormones cycle on a 24-hour basis, which is why our whole world is created for that. Hi, welcome to the patriarchy.
Oh, that is so amazing. I love this because I feel like it's so rare that we are reminded as humans that we're animal and that we're like connected to the moon cycle and
the
the
seasons. It's all the
like,
same. It's like you can't ignore that miracle.
Not think that is extremely, big narcissists of
It's
us.
so cool though. I love it.
It's so
I feel
cool.
like
Yes, 100%.
And then, sorry.
No, go.
Okay,
go,
so just
go.
the one last thing I want to say is that in terms of the what we were talking about, the mining the shit for the good stuff. So what I saw is that I had been in a winter time of my creativity from a career perspective between when my first book came out and when I got my period back after my first daughter. And like I finally had a freaking idea. I mean, it's not like I was doing nothing. I was doing plenty of things,
totally.
but it wasn't like, the difference between you're doing things but it's not the thing. And so then all of a sudden I saw, okay, we've got these seasons, we've got these 4 cycles of the moon, we've got these 4 phases of the menstrual period. They're all the same energy. This is not a mistake. Like, this is divine. And I started looking at it from a perspective of our creativity and our projects. Because I'm an entrepreneur, we run our own thing. And so I'm always looking at how everything fits together. And so like for Mom Brain, for the podcast, for example, there was the time when Mom Brain didn't exist, right? So I call that the fertile void, which is the same energy as that new moon. It's the winter time. There's nothing there. But it's a really valuable time in the in between. Like for you, Hilaria, you're really in this fertile void of that wanting your 5th child. It's like, it's that time of the pause, and that is where it can feel really awful. But that's where the gold comes from, because when you honor it,
hopeful at the same time.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like especially people, obviously because I've been so open about it, people project their own feelings on it, which is it's
Natural.
normal. It's
How
natural.
we are.
It's normal. I expect it. And I'm looking like, oh, why are they treating me that way? And I was like, okay, I understand that this has a lot to do about you. But I keep on telling people I'm okay. And I'm hopeful. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, I was just so relieved that it was over. Yeah, when I woke up from the procedure yesterday, I'm like, okay, roll up your sleeves. Let's, get back to being healthy. Let's go, let's get the cycle back, everything, and then try again.
yeah. Well, and I think that, you talked about how you honored the feelings, and you've honored your sadness. And like, I think that when we honor what we're actually feeling during those lulls, including when you have your period, like I'm talking like macro, micro, right? That we actually do get then a more fertile springtime, summertime, and harvest next time around. So when
you're being present.
Exactly. Well, so when we stop pushing for that perpetual harvest, which is the producing something every day, and the way that our culture is just so obsessed with like more and new and better than before and better than the day before. But when we honor that pause, we get fewer harvests, but more fertile ones. And we really are more fertile literally, but also metaphorically.
But that just crystallizes for me so much of my frustration week to week of like, there will be days where I sit down and I actually have, miraculously like a 2-hour period of time where I can just sit and do work. And it feels like pulling teeth. Like it is just slow going. It's not productive. It's just, I can do managerial stuff, but none of the big creative things that I actually had planned to sit down and pour into. And then there are other days where I'm totally scattered and I have like 5-minute blops here and there, but ideas are popping into my head. And it's frazzling sometimes because I'll watch John, and he has his to-do list, and his to-do list gets crossed off. And every day it's like
24 hours. It goes back to what she said.
He's resetting every 24 hours.
He like gets his exercise in, he gets his, he does whatever he needs to do. And it just feels very, every day is in theory as productive as he wills it to be, where mine sometimes feels out of control. Even if I really wanted it to feel like a hugely productive day, some days it just doesn't happen. And then some days when I totally didn't plan for it, it just pops out of nowhere.
And that's why we have to zoom out, because we are incredibly productive. We're incredibly predictable, but over a 28-day period, not over a 24-hour period.
Okay, we go back to the monkey studies.
Oh, the monkeys.
So predictability, we love that. Go back to the monkeys.
Okay. Those poor monkeys. I'm sure they pulled the plug on the study as soon as they realized the monkeys were.
They gave
and
them
then they gave them
lot of
all
food
the resources,
and water.
and everyone was happy, and the babies are fine. So
Thank you, Disney.
So basically, I started tracking my period obsessively, and I realized, due to my postpartum insomnia, but anxiety, and due to the fact that I'm just like prone to be an anxious person, I really was loving having something super predictable that I could count on. Like, I knew what my body was going to feel like for 5 days. Then I knew the next phase was coming, and I knew what my energy would be like. And then I knew, and it just felt so good to feel that my body was being so predictable when I had just gone through an experience of feeling completely out of control with my body, completely out of control with my birth and whatever. And then I started to organize my time around it. And then I started to organize my projects around that larger macro version, and start to work on my projects, knowing that, like, okay, some projects are in the fertile void. That means that, like, if it's not coming, I will just work on something else.
But do you try, like, for you, do you try, to do something when you're not in that phase?
Well, of course, because I live in the world and I can't
But
schedule
so
everything.
eventually, I want to bring this to somebody who has a typical 9-to-5 job that is relatively the same. I used to be a secretary at a doctor's office, and that was, that was a very, very, very predictable, monotonous job that I had, and I don't know where, like, my fertile void would have been.
Yeah, I think in those times, what's really important is to just give ourselves permission to say, like, I'm showing up. I'm going to get the job done because we have to show up, and we got to raise our kids and, like, make sure dinner happens and all, right? And also, like, how could you just add the energy of rest into your day? So could you walk to the subway a little bit slower? Could you, instead of, like, listening to a podcast, could you just, like, sit and listen to some classical music? Like, how?
Or sit and do nothing. Sometimes I do that where I feel like every time I'm alone, I feel like I'm supposed to be answering emails or listening to a podcast, whatever, doing something productive, quote unquote, or scrolling Instagram, definitively not productive. And now I've consciously started just putting my phone down and, like, sitting
at the wall.
still.
Literally staring at a blank wall is, like, the
looking out the window.
Ever. Yeah.
Or lying on the floor.
Your brain needs that. Yes. It needs that chance to have no input so it can have
actually
chemistry rebalance.
What the data shows is that we work the best in a 52-minute chunk with a 17-minute break. And
this is insane. What are you talking about? What do you mean?
So, yeah, this is really interesting. So what happens is if we don't take a break at the first sign of fatigue, so let's say you're doing a bunch of emails or whatever. This applies to somebody in an office, somebody running their own business, whatever.
We get frustrated. Oh.
Right? So you're sitting, you're working, you're writing up a report, you're working on a book. I don't know what you're doing. And then the first wave of fatigue hits. And what do? We distract ourselves because we're trying to keep ourselves alert. So we pick up our phone, we start scrolling, we open a new tab.
We eat something we shouldn't.
We eat something we shouldn't. We start a new frickin' task, right? Instead of finishing. But if we would actually just take a break and stare out the window, take a walk around the block, go breathe fresh air, go hug a tree. I mean, I don't know what you want to do.
Not everybody can take a break every 52 minutes.
No, but you could get up and go pee.
You can.
Not everybody.
Yes.
But I'm just saying this is the data. I'm not saying I actually set a timer for every 52 minutes. That seems impractical. But it's just interesting to know that the way our work week is set up, some guy at some point in the Industrial Revolution decided that we would have a 40-hour work week. It's not based on the way the human body works. Right. It's not based certainly on the way women work. It's not based actually on what's the most productive.
Of productivity
it's just
at all.
Arbitrary. And yet we're all just playing into it because somebody decided, over 100 years ago that's how we would do it. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
And I think, I worked as a story coordinator, which is basically like the lowest of the low totem pole producer work, my first job out of college. And I'm thinking back to now, to that time in my life, and if how I would try to apply these things. I think there are people listening who are like, I'm in a office job. I have no flexibility in my schedule. My boss is a taskmaster. Totally. Like, I have no control over this. And I'm just sitting here thinking, like, what could I have done in a way that wouldn't have felt offensive to my work colleagues, but would have provided for me that way. I walked to and from work, which gave me like a respite of just going to and from. But a lot of my colleagues took smoking breaks, and I obviously didn't smoke. So I would go out and walk when they did that. And like little places where I would steal back some time in my day, which was helpful. But I also think now, I mean, that was 11 years ago. I think now we are in a slightly different, slightly evolving culture where if you listen to this podcast and you tell your coworkers, like, Kate Northrup told me,
It's data.
and this is data, and let's do this. Let's conduct an experiment. Let's see my productivity over this week compared to last week. Where, last week I did it your way and you were happy with what I did. This week I'm going to do it my way, and let's see what my output is. People are open to that conversation if you do it in a non-confrontational, aggressive way. If you're like, I'm not saying your way is wrong. I'm saying I'd love to see how this happens. Yeah. If any of you guys out there do that, or you work in sort of a more conventional job and you have experience with this, we would love to hear from you. And we want to do some more things where we get the audience being able to to hear from you guys and hear your stories too. So it'd be really cool. I do want to figure out the voicemail thing because I love people's voices. Maybe we'll do a call-in or something, and I would love to hear your stories. So let us know if you try that at home.
mombrainpod@gmail.com.
Yes.
Email us. Now, okay, I want to take this conversation away from the workforce and into home.
Great.
So last night, one of my children is very, sometimes I mess up the grammar, is very picky eater. And because of everything that was going on with miscarriage and surgery and stuff like that, I wasn't able to, from Monday until I did it Wednesday. That's not so bad. So I did some of the things that she was suggesting last night. And it was one of the first times in a long time. I love to cook. And it was one of the first times in a long time that I just went in and I went to the store and got them a ton of different, groceries. And I was like, I am going to do exactly what she said. Efficiency is a big deal for me around bedtime. I bathe all my kids. I want them to eat. And changing that a little bit was out of the norm. And I'll do certain things with, like, pans, like washing dishes, because then I know I have to wash the dishes afterwards. And, like, washing lots of dishes was, like, just not my favorite thing. So how many of you guys like washing the dishes? So I'll, like, try to, like, plan how I'm going to cook things and be able to use as few pots and pans as possible. I am talking too much. But I would love to hear you talk about efficiency in terms of that, because I definitely have a cheaper by the dozen bathing technique and dressing technique and everything, and we are like snap, efficient.
Well, just having a routine saves so much energy and time, because we waste so much energy and time deciding what to do and whether or not to do things, and especially with kids, because as we have all experienced, kids are so rigid. And if you give an inch, right, they take a mile. So it's like, oh, this is just what we do, and that's how it is. And if you bend, like, let's say with us, it's a show after quiet time. So it's like, if the show happens at another time during the day, all hell breaks loose. It has to be like, this is when we do this. And then after dinner, we go upstairs and you put on your jammies. We read 2 books. You brush your teeth. You go potty. We do 2 songs. Lights out. We're out. Like, it happens the exact same way, because then there's not the drama of her trying to make it different. Right. There still is, but we're not letting her. And so I think that routines creates efficiency, period. End of story. I'm like such a stickler with bedtime for that same reason, and honestly with all the routines. And then also looking for, so I broke my book into experiments, so I'm glad you mentioned the word experiment, so that we can try different things just to see what results we get. So there's 14 experiments, and one of them is to simplify. And so for you're giving a great example, Hilaria, about cooking dinner and efficiency and, like, how can I use as few pans as possible? Now, that's not an area of strength for me. Like, I'm not good in the kitchen. But I'll look at, like, I will say most days of the week, because I work from home and I live in Maine, I just don't put on makeup. That's a simplification for me, because it takes time. What am I doing that for? It's just extra stuff on my face. Like, so.
And then you have to wash it off.
And
at
then
the end of the day.
then
I
there's
live in
this
New York City,
whole...
and most days I don't wear makeup.
Okay,
either,
great.
so.
Yeah, like, I mean, there's an example of, like, there are things that we do just because that's what people do. And so my invitation for you listening is, what are you doing that doesn't bring you joy and that causes you extra work and time that you could stop doing. A girlfriend of mine, she lives in Brooklyn. She's a genius at this. She's my inspiration for this chapter. She just like doesn't buy clothes that require dry cleaning because she just took dry cleaning out of her life.
Ironing.
Or ironing. I
wear
don't
yoga pants all
do
the
that. That's not one of mine, but like, or she decided she was just only going to have 3 pairs of shoes. So she has a pair of sneakers, a pair of flip-flops, and a pair of flats. And because she found that for her, again, I'm not doing this, but for her, shoes were complicating her life. And she only has 2 pairs of jeans, and she and her husband cut down all their clothes and they put them in one bureau. So the simplification, she just saved all this time and energy that she was having from managing her wardrobe.
See, I've become totally fascinated with the idea of a uniform.
Yes,
And
me too.
And people with a look. We had Debbie Mazar on the dish recently, and I said to her, I was like, when did you arrive at your look? Because she's, I feel like she has such a signature, you always know it's her. And she actually came to it when she was 4. I mean, she said her mom would like pull her hair up in this exact top knot, and now she just adds a hairpiece to it, and like it's literally been her look forever. But there is such an ease, and it's beautiful, so she should keep doing it. But it is such a unloading of brain power and energy when you have to every day like reevaluate who you are based on what you're wearing. Does it look good on you? Do you feel flattering? I mean, do you feel like you're presenting your best face forward? Your makeup routine, everything changing all the time. And I think, look, I'm as guilty of this as anyone else. Like, I love experimenting with new stuff. I'm a product junkie. I constantly am, adopting new things. But I think that obsession with the new actually makes it really hard for us to plan an identity, and it does create, especially for moms. Like, I do not have half an hour to get dressed every day anymore. The physical and emotional exhaustion I feel after spending half an hour trying to get dressed and still being unhappy with what I put on that day is really annoying to me. So I've become totally fascinated with
like
people
a capsule wardrobe.
Well, if you think about what your husband wears, it's kind of the same thing every day.
Jeans and a t-shirt every day, different
slacks
one.
and a button-up shirt or whatever. It's the same thing. And
But Alec has like a million of them. He's got more clothes and more shoes than I have, and it all looks exactly the same. Although I have to say that I'm a bit of the wardrobe person with what I do is I have my days where I have the energy to put that energy in, and then I have days where I'm like, I'm gonna put my yoga pants on and my heels, my like boot heels, and a sweater, and that's it.
But do you feel more like yourself on one of those days or the other? Which one feels more like you?
The yoga pants. Because I am something. I mean, right now I started with like heels on and like sitting properly, and then now I've got a pillow on my lap and my legs are crossed. And Cal was yelling at me for leaning in the wrong direction. Not yelling. He's very nice. I lie.
That's such a good point. Is that like to embrace that is essentially what we're talking about. To embrace how we actually feel instead of trying to make ourselves feel a different way.
That being said, Daphne and I, and I'm sure a lot of people for many different reasons who are listening to this podcast, Daphne and I definitely live lives where sometimes we don't, we agree to do something.
Of course.
And we agree to do something in advance. And that means that I have to put on a dress, and even if I don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, we all have to do things that we don't want to. But how can you infuse that experience with your actual reality? Mm-hmm. So like you talked about, Daphne, like the experiments at work or at home, like a day when, for example, if you're feeling that low energy and you do need to cook dinner or whatever, like maybe that's the day that you could let yourself off the hook and just make noodles or whatever. Like, I think that a lot of the issue we run into with overworking and overdoing as women is because we have these unreasonable expectations of what it looks like to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect woman.
I do think we would all be so much happier if we just simplified.
Yeah.
If we took that image of the perfect and analyzed what about it was most attractive to us. Because if what's most attractive to me was the idea of self-knowledge, comfort in your own skin, and increase productivity by not having to waste countless hours trying to find an outfit that fits and works well, and then I'm having to clean up all the mountain of clothes that I've thrown to the ground. Yes. If that's what's really alluring to me, there's a million ways to do it that don't complicate my life, And I think that's we've twice in this conversation talked about holding a mirror up to ourselves and doing the comparison game of like, how does she over here, magical, mystical, working mother who does everything, how does she do it all, and I struggle, and then more in a personal idea, how do I achieve a life that lets me do less but achieve more. And I love that your focus isn't on like, oh, let your life be half-assed. Like, that's not the point. The point is achieve the same amount, but work smarter, not harder, which I always think.
And forgive yourself when you are naturally feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
And focus, I mean, you talked about it with your friend in Brooklyn. Focus on what makes you happy. It would not make me happy to have 3 pairs of shoes.
No,
I
neither.
I
need a lot of shoes.
Like,
I like a
will
lot of
remember
shoes.
that for the rest of my life, thinking that this woman is happier with 3 pairs of shoes.
But how can
And
we do that with something else in our lives?
Exactly.
Right,
I
exactly.
definitely have things in my life where it does make me happy to, like, I get happy when I don't have that many like shampoos and conditioners.
Me too.
I want to have a very specific beauty routine, because certain things where you can, you can pick and choose. And I think that we probably can all relate to it.
Wait, I'm glad you brought it back to beauty routine, because before we started recording, Kate had brought up jeans, mom jeans, from mom brain to mom jeans.
Oh, the hips.
And the widening,
Yes,
of, the hips that happen after.
Yes.
So whatever, Busy Phillips recently wore her wedding dress 11 years later or 10 years or whatever later on her show, and she was talking about how everything fit, which is amazing. I don't think my wedding dress would fit, but she was like, but my rib cage has widened.
Yes, mine too.
Isn't it like you can totally be in a sick shape after you have kids, but the body has just shifted.
Your bones move.
Hips and rib cage. No,
Your rib
unbelievable.
cage can move up to 9 inches during pregnancy.
What? But so interesting.
Wild.
enough,
It's almost a foot.
It's wild.
I don't know how you guys feel, but I like my body so much better after having kids.
I like my
Because
wider hips.
I feel so much more feminine. Whereas like I'm always like, a relatively thin person, but like now I have like more curves. And don't you write to me and laugh and say I don't, okay? Because I hate when people write down me on my Instagram and tell me I'm not curvy. Because in my opinion, compared to before, I am curvy.
Well, all you know is compared to before. Yeah.
But it is an interesting thing that happens. And this is like very weird, and Callie, feel free to cut this out if this is weird. But like my hips do something as very, like in the first few weeks of my pregnancy, my tailbone starts to like crack a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with the widening of the hips.
Yeah.
And then months after having a baby, it stops doing that, because I think your hips do come in a little bit.
That's interesting.
And it's interesting this time around, this pregnancy that did not go very far. It started doing that, and I'll be very curious to see how long it takes, because I didn't support a 8-pound baby. How quickly it goes back to the same things.
so
I've
it had
noticed
already
that.
started doing
It started,
the cracking
yeah, no.
thing.
It's like I'll notice that as I sit, like every once in a while, my lower spine will go like, kirk. And I think it has
Interesting.
to do with the relaxin that allows your hips to spread and then come back together. So yes, all those people who say I'm not curvy, I totally have curvy hips. Okay.
We can,
Yes.
You get to decide for
Okay,
yourself.
yes.
We all get to decide about our bodies for ourselves.
Yeah.
But it is true. Like there are things, and right, there are things about our bodies that will never go back, and there are things about our lives that will never go back. And I think that that's like one of the things that I just continue to work on embracing as a total control freak, a recovering control freak, that like things can be better. Like it's better now, and embracing like the ways that I do love my wider hips.
And the more that you try to hold on to control,
The worse it
more
gets.
I'm a recovering perfectionist, as we talked about before. With the whole perfectionism, with the control, you are so out of control.
Yeah.
Because you are not just letting it be. Because sometimes you just got to stop fighting the fight.
Well, it's
And
such a
then
waste of energy and
it's
time
a waste
to try
of energy.
to
And we,
fight it.
As Kate walked in here, we started talking a bit about yoga. And in yoga, beginners work the hardest. And beginners think that they are not working hard enough. And they squint their face and they grab the mat with their fingers and like tense every single muscle because you're trying really, really, really hard. And then the effortlessness that you see, the elegance that you see, yogis or dancers or, even basketball players, whatever the thing is that you go to, that efficiency of movement is what allows them to be great. And you can completely apply that to your home life, to your work life, to your emotional life, to your relationship, and just say, you never should want to work harder than you have to. Life is hard enough as it is. So take a deep breath and pick and choose and take a step back and sort of say, okay, this is a battle I want to do. This is not. Do that in your relationship. I do in my relationship all the time. You know, there's times when, you know, my husband's going to piss me off about something, and I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm like, do I bring it up or not? And the more, if I bring it up all the time and I poke and I poke and I poke and I don't just let him be and do the certain things that he wants to do, then I'm not doing my best by either one of us. Then it saves the times for when I'm really, really, really upset about something.
Right.
And I can point that out and it's stronger.
And you get better results from
Yes.
that one time than you would from doing it 100
And same thing
times.
with parenting as well. You know, we talk about a lot about that on
Yeah,
Mom
we
Brain. The
do.
more that we yell at our kids about every small little thing, you know, it doesn't. I told the other day, Rafa takes a lipstick the other day and writes on my wallpaper, my beautiful, beautiful
Excellent.
wallpaper. And I could yell at him, which wouldn't clean the wallpaper. Or we found makeup remover and we actually got it off and we did it together. You know, and we talked about how we don't do that. You know, number one, you ruined Mommy's lipstick that I really liked, fixable, but like it was, you know. And then number two, we don't draw on walls. You know, you can draw on paper.
But this goes back to what Kate had said about you can trust your feeling on something, but not the volume.
Yes.
And here, you know, you are totally legitimate to be frustrated or upset or whatever with your kids, with your spouse, with your job, with anything that might be there. But you don't always have to have this. You can modulate your response so that you get better results, working smarter, not harder.
Yes.
And for the first time perhaps ever on Mom Brain, I really do think we have a theme here, even though we've lost our train of thought so many times and had so many
Yes.
funny little detours. I think ultimately all of this comes down to finding ways to let your life help you be more comfortable in your own skin and be more comfortable and maximize in your own life. I love the techniques and the anecdotes that you shared today, Kate. I feel like I have so much to think about just in terms of trusting my own body, trusting what my own brain wants me to be doing
And what
in a
are we
certain day.
capable of?
What are we capable of? And being okay with having some days feel like we're capable of everything and some days be more about
That's
the
how we're designed.
luteal phase.
That is how we're designed. Like
love
that's the magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so
Oh,
much for
thank
spending
you
your
so
time
Thank
much.
you.
with
This
us.
is so fun.